Right.
Anywho, it is time now for this week's guest. You will recall me banging on about how much I loved Interview with the Vampire on this very podcast, and frankly, doing it even more so with the 5-star review that I wrote for Empire. So I was very pleased to get to talk to Jacob Anderson this week, who zoomed in from Prague, where he's currently shooting season 2 of the show, to talk about all things vampiric. So here is me and Jacob Anderson.
Hey, Jacob, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am not too bad.
Can I say thank you for being so nice about the show?
Oh, not at all. I absolutely loved it, as you might have gathered. It's been a long wait. It has been a long wait. It's been, what, a year, I think, since it aired in the US? I wondered if we'd ever get it.
Yeah, me too. I was asking for I'd have like people at home, like my friends and family would be like, whatever happened to, when you left us for 6 months, when you moved to New Orleans, what happened with that? I'm like, it's out. You just can't watch it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's wild because it was like one of the best reviewed shows of last year in the US. So it was like a massive deal. And over here, everyone's like, I don't know what that is. Never heard of it.
Yeah. Thank you, BBC, for being so accommodating to my family.
And stepping in and dropping it all at once, which I think we all really, really appreciated. Are you in Prague at the moment?
I am, yeah.
So you're shooting season 2. Prague is doubling for Paris, right?
Yes, it is. And a bit of Paris is doubling for Paris as well. But yeah, Prague's been lovely. It's a beautiful city.
And how have you found shooting season 2? Obviously in a different place, a different environment, different atmosphere. Has it been quite different to season 1?
Yeah, it's been very different. It's very different. And it's jarring as well because New Orleans is New Orleans really reminds me of Bristol, where I grew up. So I felt very comfortable there immediately, but it's also like, it's such a specific place and it has such a specific, like, I'm not like a spiritual person, but it has like a very specific energy. And then to be in Europe has its own kind of energy. And I almost feel like I belong less here than I did in New Orleans. But that's, I think, really helpful because Louis and Claudia are completely out of their depth. And I think that's kind of given it something to be in such an unfamiliar place.
Because it is very much, seems to, it feels like a second chapter, doesn't it? Like it's a very different vibe. He's in a very different place. He's no longer kind of under the thumb of Lestat. Like he's going out on his own with Claudia and kind of discovering what this whole big vampire life is. And I think AMC dropped, I don't know if you saw, they dropped a clip from season 2 earlier this week, which was Louis and Armand kind of bonding on what I can only really describe as a vampire night out.
The murder party.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was referred to.
It's a great scene, and actually their dynamic's really interesting because obviously his dynamic with Armand is very different to the dynamic with Lestat. Like, so is Louis? Would you say what kind of headspace is he in when we join him in season 2?
Louis is. I think it's fair to say he's like an absolute mess, kind of most of the time. And I think what's interesting. Because I don't want to give too much away, but I'd like something that I have really, and I think it's on my mind at the moment because it's what I've been doing this week. But like Dubai is something to really look out for this season. And I think as well, when you think about where Dubai ended in season 1, it really charges a lot of the storytelling in this season. But Louis is just absolutely not okay. He's not okay. I can tell you that much.
Murder party or no, he's not having the best time.
Yeah, I think, funnily enough, murder party is one of the moments of happiness. Meeting Armand is like a little light in the darkness.
I mean, you mentioned the Dubai stuff. I loved the Dubai stuff, actually, in season 1. And it's obviously a big shift from the books because Daniel here is much older. Like, he's slightly irascible. He gives absolutely no fucks whatsoever. He regularly calls Louis kind of on what he perceives as his bullshit. And I think that dynamic is just so much fun. But I guess it makes up a really small percentage of the overall runtime. Like, how much time did you spend with Eric doing that stuff?
I met Eric like 3 weeks before we started shooting Dubai. But we did all of season 1 Dubai, we did the whole thing at the end. So which was really useful in terms of like I could remember things that I was talking about. Like I could remember what that looked like and how that felt. And that was really helpful. it also just gave me just extra time to learn those huge passages of beautiful language. But but yeah, me and Eric just kind of. I remember Rollins said something to me really early on that was like, when Louis is talking about his story, when he's recounting his story, that he has to kind of hypnotize himself, that he like falls into these moments where he's there again. And that also that I had to do that to Eric. So there's a bit in the first book as well where it describes Louis as like, Daniel describes Louis as flames in a skull. And like, so I just had those two things in my head. I was like, flames in a skull, hypnotize him. Let's start at the beginning. As long as I have those two things at the very beginning of that interview, then we can just play off each other and see where it goes. I love Eric Bogosian is an absolute sweetheart and an amazing actor. And I like such a great scene partner and a really good listener. And I don't just mean that in like a literal sense. I just mean that like, I love when you see actors listening, like rather than speaking. And he's fucking great at that.
Yeah, it's genuinely, it's one of the more genius moves, I think, of this show is changing that character completely. But it's interesting you say you shot those at the end, because obviously Dubai Louis is very different to New Orleans Louis. And I kind of wondered, like, because I love that Louis wears lots of different masks in the show. Like, he speaks and behaves really differently when he's around his family, the girls that work for him originally, like when he's human, with the businessman that he kind of deals with. And then at the end, when we see him in Dubai, he's much more alien, far less human than we've seen him. And like, were those different sides to Louis kind of part of the appeal for you going in? And was it quite difficult to nail down the delineation between those?
100%. It was like, it was a big draw to it. Like, how amazing to be able to play somebody over, a century. And like, he, like finding those things, like finding the things that he has carried with him over time, and then finding the things that he's completely lost were it was challenging, but it was a fun challenge. And I don't really, I think that in season 1, at least, I'm not sure how I'm not sure how much like maturity I would have had to put into that if we didn't shoot it all at the end. Because I was getting to know Louis as I was playing him. But yeah, like, I don't really know what else I could really say about that, other than I got to play somebody over a century, and it was. I have rules. I have my Dubai Louis rules now, and it's like, when he's mad, the accent comes back a little bit. When he's this, the thing comes, because again, got to be careful. But like, how much of Louis' detachment is real is also a factor. And I kept sort of trying to get answers about that, about what they wanted to do in season 2, so that I could, delineate between a truth and a falsehood.
We learn that he's not the most reliable narrator during the course of the first season. But one of the things I love about your portrayal of this character is the physicality of him. Like, when we see him as a human, he has a kind of rolling swagger, this gait to him. And then when we see him, in the modern day, he is so still. There's an economy of movement to everything he does. Like, it's very precise. It's very measured. It's very non-human. And I thought that was just genius.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think code switching was like, as soon as I read the pilot, before I'd even auditioned, I was like, this is somebody who is in a perpetual state of code switching. He has to, in order to survive and exist in all these different rooms and with all these different people, he has to adapt himself. Which again tells you a lot about how he presents himself in Dubai. We know at this point that this is somebody that he's a chameleon, sometimes by necessity, sometimes out of, fear, other things. But yeah, that was such a fun thing. It's something you don't really get to do. And it's also something that you do and nobody really notices. Like, but I was on screen a lot with the show. So I guess I had the privilege of actually being able to do those things in a way that was noticeable. Like even the reason that Louis speaks how he speaks in Dubai practically is because you'd have passages of narration and then he'd start speaking in the past. So we had to differentiate his voice. And then that became a thing that you were like, but when did that happen? When did that shift happen? Why did it happen? Why has he got this strange kind of neutral accent when he's like New Orleanian, Creole New Orleanian? I get excited thinking about it. It's like, I still get to do it now.
I imagine that you would think like you don't get to do an awful lot of that where the dialogue is very minimal and it is very about micro expressions and micro movement. But of course, you did Grey Worm, and that's basically he's the king of like stoic facial expressions, right? So you had a crash course in this already.
Yeah, it's all micro expressions, and like I really learned on that show. Like, it's the way to stay in a scene would be to really listen to what was happening and to respond to it. And like, I never wanted Grey Worm to be like dead behind the eyes. I never wanted him to just be this kind of like, like stone soldier or an ornament. And of course he's going to have feelings about what's happening. But yeah, I had to really learn how to do things with my face and try and tell a story with my face. And now I'm like, a lot of the time I just try and remove lines. I'm like trying to say less so on this show because the language is so beautiful.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I'm like a huge Anne Rice fan. I read all of her books pretty much when I was at university, so I'm slightly obsessed with it. She obviously didn't live to see this show. I can't help thinking she would have really loved it though, because it feels true to her original story in the way. And I love Neil Jordan's film for very different reasons, but it's true to her story in a way that wasn't, because obviously Interview with the Vampire is a love story. And I felt like that was the bit that, it came out in the 90s, to be expected. Like, a lot of that got lost in the film. And I love that this show really leans into that. And, and as toxic and problematic as, Lestat can be, you guys are kind of magnetic on screen. Like, was there a particular, because you must have had chemistry tests with Sam for this. Like, was there a particular scene they got you to run together when you were reading for it?
Yeah, we did a few. We did the two that I remember. I think we did three, but I remember we did the first meeting at the Fair Play, a most agreeable young man with that one. And then we did the fight outside the incinerator, where Louis kind of lays out the differences between he and Lestat in terms of their social standing at that time, which was great because it's like you get that first spark of them meeting, and then you get the domesticity of their relationship. Just like, essentially the argument for me anyway was always like, you didn't take, was Lestat being like, you didn't take out the bins. And Lou being like, well, this is why I didn't take out the bins, because I had to deal with a lot today. And this happened, like it's, I love when this show gets domestic, because it really highlights that sort of the romance part of the Gothic romance. Although, like you say, it's not a relationship I would ever want to be in. It's very toxic. It's a very relationship, but they can't stay away from each other.
No, they can't. Although season 2 obviously gives a slightly different dynamic, because it's another love story, but with Armand, essentially, which is a very different dynamic, right, from the one that Louis had with Lestat.
Very different, yeah. It's very, very different. And, yeah.
Can't say too much for those ones, but it will be different from the books anyway, right? Because in the books he's a 17-year-old boy, so it's a very different dynamic.
Yeah. That's a good point. There are things that anybody that any fan of Anne Rice's writing, and specifically of the Vampire Chronicles, will know who Armand is, and it's still very much a part of this adaptation. He's a very complicated character in a different way to Lestat, but he is complicated. Everybody is a mess. That is Jacob Anderson's take on season 2. Everybody is a mess.
How have you been a mess making this? I mean, have you become essentially nocturnal doing this? Because it's all night shoots, right?
No, I mean, season one was all night. It was entirely night. But season two, we've been doing any interior scene we've been doing during the day, pretty much. Which for me, I don't know if it's just Stockholm syndrome, but it's been really tough. Making this show during the day is hard. It feels wrong. There's something about working at 3 a.m. that makes you feel like a vampire. It makes you feel like it gives you a weird, kind of giddy, heightened energy. So if Louis feels really like displaced in season two, you can know that part of that, at least, is Jacob being like, what is this daytime? What is this?
Shooting in the sunlight just so wrong. No, I totally get what you mean, because it must feel like at that time of night you do feel kind of disconnected from everything around you. Like it's weird. Everyone else is asleep. You're doing this kind of crazy thing in the middle of the night. So yeah, it does give you that sense of otherness, which I guess the character has. And last question I would ask you, which is slightly disconnected to this. Obviously, you're not just an actor, right? You are also a musician. And I just was curious like how those two things sit within you. They're both clearly very important parts of your life. Do they scratch different itches for you? Does one or other feel like more a part of you that you're more connected to?
Yeah, they definitely scratch different itches, I think. But this show has been a bit of an exception. Like I've always played characters that are really far away from me. So acting's like it's a way to expel a bit of energy. And then writing has been about like essentially therapy, like self-therapizing myself. But this show has taken up a bit of that space as well, just in terms of like, I don't know. I always say this, that me and Louis are the same, and we're probably not the same. And it's there's a lot that goes into playing him. That it's not just like I'm not showing up to set and I'm like, it's me. But like there are things about Louis that are really therapeutic to explore, really cathartic to explore. And it's probably why I haven't written another album. Not to blame. Rolling keeps saying to me, like, don't blame me for there not being another Riley Ritchie album. I'm blaming you, Rolling. Your fault. He's like a big music, he's an encyclopedia of music knowledge. But yeah, they have very different places in my heart and in my head, and they do different things, but they both are just ways of me getting rid of a bit of energy and basically being functional.
Well, maybe you can blur the lines. I mean, Sam can carry a tune, as we heard in season one. If you're looking for some sort of backing vocals, maybe draft him in.
Sam's a great singer. Yeah. I will not be asking him to do that, but I enjoy his voice.
As did we all. As you said, like it's a really special show. Loving it. I'm hoping we won't have to wait another year for season 2. Hopefully they'll have caught up with US by then. Very much looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks, James.